Until I met my new best friend. All of my boys say I'm tripping. When they call, I'm not answering. They always get my voicemail cause I'm...
Alex, are we rolling? We are rolling. Welcome to a very special episode of Sorry I've Been So Busy.
Bittersweet.
Andrew Goldstein is here.
At Ange Gold on Twitter, ANGEGOLD.
My name is Matt Goldich. At Matt Goldich on Twitter, MattGoldich. Producer Alex Brazell is here in the Showbiz studios, and we might as well just say we're going to talk to Alex some more in a few minutes. He is our guest for today's final
special
episode.
Guest.
Special
There's
guest.
a special reason.
Usually I tease the guest. I don't reveal who it is up top. But Andrew, good to see you, buddy. The listeners, we have not been with you for several months. It's been since, I think, December.
Spoiler alert, we've been busy.
We have been very busy since we've rolled out a new episode. And just to recap, we started this in 2016, and for a long time we would have one every week. And then
we were really good.
We were banking them for, I would say, at least a year and a half, probably.
That first 100.
Yeah. And then it started to get a little bit more sporadic. You had a baby, but there were other reasons why we were busy, and we would go for weeks where we would rerun old episodes. And then somewhere about a few months ago...
also with the baby, we moved uptown to basically where you live.
Well, the ironic thing is that you moving near me made it harder to do the podcast, which is very strange and hard to explain. Part of the reason is you and I have no technical ability to do this podcast on our own. We need Alex.
I could figure it out, but I'm never going to do it.
No, we would never do it. We need Alex. Alex is great. He's got the all the know-how and the equipment. And so we would come down here to the East Village and
literally diagonally opposite.
And when
at least for me,
and when I was doing
the city,
right, and for me as well. And when I was doing it, you used to live near here, and I used to be the only one doing it. And but
you had off on Friday, so it ended up not being...
That made it easier. Sometimes we would do nights, and I would come from work. The other thing would be, and this is a crazy window into my life, but it used to be that my son had a nanny, and so when I would go to work Monday through Thursday, the nanny would, and my wife was working, and the nanny would watch him, and then Fridays, so we would do the podcast, and I would do other things, and my son, and so I would sort of need to get out of the house, and so I would come down here, and then I would go to my office and work for a few hours, even if I didn't have to. Now my son's in school, so I can pretty much stay home when I have a day off and get work done there. There's no reason to come all the way to the Lower East Side.
Yeah.
So we can talk about it.
Life changes.
Yes. And by the way, we had a great run. I mean, it was
a really good run.
And we'll talk more about that coming up. But I feel
Did we bury the lead? Yeah, this is the last.
This is the last episode. And by the way, that's not permanent. Who knows? If the opportunity comes in the future to do a very special episode.
Yeah.
But I think we did. I think this is for sure the last one.
When we started, if you said we would have done over 100 episodes. I mean, I said it on the live show at the 100th, but doing 100 of anything.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Either of us would have put money on that.
Yes.
Ever.
And
here we are. Over 100.
And
successful.
And one of the weird things is
mildly
it became a regular hangout for us, for you and I.
Which was wonderful.
Now we have to really make time to
we live close together.
We do live close together. That makes it easier. We did go to the Sixers playoff game last week, which was fun. We should say. We've been very busy with that, with following their...
Our whole text chain was spread out around the Barclays Center.
Well, yeah, there was only one person missing on the text chain who was not at the game. He lives in Texas.
Far away.
Yeah.
And as we said many times on the podcast, it was like a reason to see our old friends.
Sure. I mean, that was really one of the great things was all the people I met, the people I got to hang out with, and the people we had not seen in years that ended up coming in and meeting up with. And it's been really fun. So I have no regrets about it.
I loved having a creative endeavor.
Yes.
That wasn't pressure filled with.
No, super relaxing and fun. Yeah. And by the way, and I feel like it would have been wrong to just leave the listeners hanging. I mean, obviously people know something's up if they subscribe to the podcast, if they're paying attention. A new episode is now dropped in 4 months, but it would have felt wrong to just just never say anything and just never do another episode of the podcast again.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, our super fans like Sam Shafson
yes,
and
Josh Galprin,
and
people like that would have been very
my sister-in-law
confused and perturbed.
who listens to us
Who is
while
it?
she
Is
makes
it-
Rice Krispie.
Who is it that listens to it like 7:30 a.m. like the morning it drops? Like, is it Abrams or who is it? It's somebody in your orbit.
I don't
forget.
I don't remember.
But
yeah, all of our busybodies.
Yes.
We appreciate so much. But yeah, look, it got it just got, and I got busy and you
Sure.
got busy.
I actually, by the way, am impressed. We did record a couple after you had a newborn at home.
Well, oddly enough, paternity leave was easier
Because you had
than
some-
going back to work. Because
Yes.
paternity leave, I was like, I'm going to take this Friday morning and go to the East Village.
because it's
And
like your
it was
one
like my
thing
one
for your
thing
to
get
do
out.
that week.
Yeah. So we were pretty good. We did a bunch during my 3 months at home. But
Yeah.
then once that ended and I went back to work and then I took on a side project and it was just, I've had a crazy couple months.
Yes. And I did want to mention briefly, I mean, we'll talk more in a few minutes about all the guests we've had, but while talking about what people have been busy with, there were two specific past guests of the pod that I wanted to mention what they've been busy with over the last few months while we have been off air. One is our last new episode, which was with Jordan Fisher, and we were talking about his stand-up spot on Fallon, and then it went so well, he got hired as a writer there.
Yeah, shout out to Jordan Fisher. Unreal.
And I've seen him a couple times.
Unreal story. Yeah, you've done a
Yeah.
couple comedy shows with him.
And it's so funny because we could have done the whole next pod on the process of him getting hired as a writer.
We could have had him back,
we could have had him
within
back
the next week
someday. And
that's like a great success story
Yes.
of young comedian gets booked on the Tonight Show,
Yeah.
crushes it, and they're like, this kid's really funny.
Right.
He submits, he gets hired, and he's getting stuff on.
yeah, and it's great because
And he did the podcast.
yeah,
He
and
told us all about
and
it.
sometimes those stand-ups, like it feels like a separate part of the show, not related. It's good to know that people are watching, that people are paying attention, that people are
Yeah. So that's cool.
and then
we had him first.
Yeah, and then the other past guest who's been very busy, we alluded to him being at the Sixers game, was Michael Kaplan, who had a heart attack since we last.
And lucky we still have him.
Still have him. He's
Thank
still
God.
around. And he's been talking about that a lot on his podcast.
And it's
Lost
like
in America.
He did stand up for the first time
I know.
since, and
Amazing.
their podcast is doing really well. I joked this morning when I told the text chain that includes Michael Weber, 2-time guest of the pod. That,
the only 2-time guest.
Yeah, and I said, we're on our way to record our last Sorry I've Been So Busy. We just couldn't compete with Lost in America.
No, well, they have a lot of good content with the heart attack. And
Shout out to
everything.
Turner
Yeah,
Sparks.
yeah.
Yeah, but he's doing okay. Shout out to Cap. And, that was wild.
Yeah.
He was busy. He was
He's
busy
been very busy, yeah.
trying to not...
Anything else you want to tackle or bring up before we bring in our guest? for
Former
today?
guest of the pod, Roger Hales, moved out of the city. Took his family, moved to
Best of
Virginia.
luck, bon
best of
voyage to
luck,
Roger.
Best of luck to one of my favorite collaborators, Roger Hales.
Yes.
That was pretty cool.
This
I'm
is all
trying to
since
think.
everybody's busy with
Dan Powell produced the
Tim Robinson
Tim
sketch
Robinson
show, which
sketch show,
I've
which
seen
everybody is
I've seen the
tweeting.
first two, and they're very funny. And
everybody's saying this is like
yeah, it's great.
groundbreaking sketch comedy, so I'm excited to watch that. Shout out to Dan.
Yeah. Well,
So,
okay. Well, let's talk more
yeah,
about all the
we'll
great
get to
guests
guests,
we've
but
had and everything. But
We'll get to it.
yeah,
we'll get to it.
All right. Should we take a break? Let Alex make some pennies on the way out, and
We're
then,
gonna have
and then-
Alex Brazil. He's
and
gonna come
then-
around from behind the
and
glass.
then we'll bring Alex in, and we'll
gonna sit.
We'll have him to discuss some of our favorite.
But
memories from the
first,
pod.
me talking about Warby Parker for the 1,000th time.
Oh yeah. You'd be like, that thing when Obama is president? That's when this was recorded. All right, Alex. Let's take a break. All right, we're back with a guest who I think listeners of the pod know very well. He is not. He's never set foot in this room. No, he's never been an official guest on the pod, but he's produced close to every episode. We can actually talk about that. There were a few episodes we did in L.A. where Alex did not produce them, but he almost over 100 episodes of the pod Alex has produced, and he's been a super big help to us the whole time, and with everything from even helping us book guests, and we've had him on mic a few times, but we've never really talk to him, and we've never really
even off mic. We've never
actually had a conversation with us. We're walking, we go, let's go, and then we and this is an opportunity. You know, he's the perfect person here to sort of like reminisce with some of our favorite memories of the pod. So Alex Brazell is here. Everybody, welcome, Alex.
Honored to be on.
Hi.
I thought this day would never come.
What's up, pal?
You thought we would keep doing this podcast forever.
That, but then also, I was honored that you guys asked me to be on.
Yeah.
I mean, this
well,
is
who
not
else would we
something-
have for the final, you know?
I think it's very fitting, and, you know, I have a whole sheet of notes.
Yeah, we have
that
a
I've
lot of
prepared.
notes that we won't get to.
Let's talk
Yeah.
first about how we each met you. What is your memory of this?
I, in 2016, was doing some pro bono work for Sherrod Small on Race Wars on Sirius XM, like every Wednesday night or Thursday night, whatever it was. And I would sit off mic and write some jokes and hold them up on paper for him. And every once in a while, I'll chime in. Anyway, one night, David Feldman, my old friend from back when I was an NBC page, and he was hanging around at Late Night with Conan O'Brien. My old friend David Feldman walks in, and he has this little nebbishy Jewy manager with him, and
Manager.
very
loose.
in air quotes. And I rebonded with David Feldman, my old bit of a mentor,
Yeah.
and we said, let's go get lunch sometime. And so I communicated through Alex to try to set up this lunch with David. And like a month later or so, we went to Veselka.
And of all places.
You went as well?
I went as well as the three of us.
So I had met you before this.
The real Algonquin Round Table.
When did you start doing the podcast?
I ate like 6 pierogies that day, like way over ordered.
And we sort
I
of
was
bonded
really
over
full.
our affinity for food.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we had the same taste.
Let's go back.
Yeah.
When did you start doing the podcast with Feldman?
So I started doing the podcast with Feldman, I would say like early 2015.
This was here.
So I
You
started
bailed
doing
him
it
out
here.
of prison, and then what happened?
I bailed him out of prison. There was a lot of charges. I don't want to get into it.
How did you even meet Feldman in the first place?
So I
Russian
met
steam room.
Feldman. Yeah. Bathhouse on 12th Street in First. I met Feldman because I was producing a live talk show called Running Late with Scott Rogowski. Scott
Past guest of
Rogowski,
the pod, by
past
the
guest
way, we
and
should
past
mention.
host of HQ now.
And now he's
in
at
the past
He's
tense.
at DAZN.
DAZN, yeah.
that show
he's hosting
started?
DAZN. It has started.
Okay.
Speaking of, this episode is brought to you by the Pizza Hut Pizzone.
Yeah.
Calzone.
Yes. There you go.
So anyway, David and I met because I had been one of his 4 listeners that was a fan of his podcast.
Yeah.
You know, for whatever reason, I think I found him through Marc Maron. I was a huge, avid listener of WTF, being the comedy nerd that I am. And David Feldman was actually on the 4th episode, I believe, of Marc Maron. This was the first incarnation
When
of
he
Maron.
was struggling to get guests.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, he was struggling big time.
Sure.
And he did a phoner with David. He couldn't even, you know, bother to fly him in.
And
That's how insignificant
wait,
he was.
but hasn't David? Didn't he used to live in L.A. at this point, or no?
Yes, he used to live in L.A. So this is how I became a fan of David's, right? Was listen. So David made some, off-color jokes like he normally does,
As is.
but his just that disposition, that old Jewiness really resonated with me.
By the way, I remember seeing David's like half-hour special on Comedy Central.
Oh yeah. So then, I'm always curious. Like anytime, David or Maron had a guest that I liked that resonated with me, I would like look up all their stuff. And so I watched David stand up. I'm like, this guy is sick in the head, but he's hysterical.
Yeah.
And I started listening to his podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And he would have on like guests like Eddie Pepitone, like Frank Conniff, these guys that nobody knew. So I felt like I was part of this like exclusive little club of like, comedy nerds. And so I was a huge fan, listened every week. And then
exclusive club of people who are fans of David Feldman.
they called them basement dwellers.
Yes, that's about right.
And
so
I would fall into that
Feldman
category.
was a guest on Rogowski's
So
show.
no. So here's the thing. So I start executive producing Scott's show. And, this is no slight towards Scott or anything, but I thought the show could use some, writers.
Yeah.
I thought just to spruce
As
up
any
the
show
quality. As
should.
any
It's
show
no- it's
should.
no
He was
insult.
doing everything on his own. It was an impossible task. So I said to, as the producer, I go, the Rip Thorne role, I go, you need some writers. And I just thought it'd be funny. I got Feldman's email through Caroline's, which I kind of worked with.
Sure.
They had it, I guess, from booking him back in the 80s or whenever it was. And so I get his email, and I just cold email him, just being like, I know this is insulting. You're an Emmy Award-winning writer, but we need writers for this show. Would you want to, work for this for $100? I just go, I know it's insultingly low, but... And I never thought he would respond. I just did it like, it was just like a Hail Mary. All of a sudden, 2 days later, he goes, "Would love to. Let's meet for coffee."
Yeah,
that's how desperate he was for money. Yeah.
No. But he's that guy who's like, I'll do it.
Yeah.
I'll write jokes for anybody.
He'll do it for anything.
If you're a joke writer, you'll write jokes for free.
And I think he appreciated my chutzpah.
Yeah. And so through him, you met him, and then you ended up doing his podcast here.
So I meet him. We have an instant connection.
Yeah.
We fall in love. And he's like, I need a home for my podcast. I just moved to New York writing for Robert Smigel. I think I'm going to be here permanently for now. And I need a home. And so I said, why don't you start doing it with me? I have some equipment in my apartment. My roommate is an engineer. He mixes for.
Had you recorded
music.
Other people's podcasts here?
I did. So I was already recording one podcast called the Movie Preview Review.
Sure.
Right, with Kevin Bartini, which you did. That was an interesting experience.
You were guests on that.
Yes, you were indeed. So I started doing that just to be like, well, let me just see if I could dip my toes in this water and see what amounts to it. I had no expectations going in. And then all of a sudden I get David. I'm like, this is an actual blue chip I kind of landed. I have David Feldman who wants to do a podcast in my apartment. This seems kind of viable. So we started doing it, and it was amazing. As a comedy nerd, now David gives me access to all of these comedians that I look up to. We had Bobby Slayton, I remember in the beginning. And, I love Bobby Slayton. I remember seeing him at a club with my uncle, back when I was 12. So this is like a dream come true.
And so you started doing the pod here in 2015, and I remember getting an email from you. I don't know how did you find me?
Okay.
Because I had only met Feldman once.
Okay, so this is the thing. So I followed all these comedy writers. I would just be like, who writes for this show? This show's funny. I'm going to follow all the writers on Twitter. Yeah. And you were always one of my favorite follows. You had this one Scottie Pippen joke that I just fell in love with. I forgot what it was.
I don't remember.
Matt, what was it?
I can find it.
And so
I have tweeted before that Michael B. Jordan is the Scottie Pippen of Michael Jordan's.
I don't think it was. I don't think Michael B. Jordan was in the cultural zeitgeist at that point. This was earlier on. But it was you. I thought you were hysterical, and you reminded me of one of my friends. So I was like, I want to get exactly. So I just someone I went to camp with. So I was like, I want to get this guy in my studio, and I feel like he's a great comedy writer. David's a comedy writer. Maybe connect these two, something good will happen.
That's how you do it.
That's how you do it.
Guests.
So I cold emailed you. I just said, come and do it, and sure enough, I mean, listen, I emailed so many comedy writers, none of which got back to me.
I remember coming here, and it was probably, and you'll appreciate this, I think it was the first time I ever did anything on a weekend day by myself after my son was born. Yeah. Because I remember you emailed me, and it was right after he was born, and I was like, give me a few months. And then it was the first time where it was he was born in February, and it was maybe in May or June on a Saturday or Sunday. I was in town, and I was like, I escaped to do, because I was a fan of David, and so I was excited to come to it. And then, and then so it wasn't until almost a year later when you met Alex, and I think it was you who put together two and two, hey, we should talk to this guy about, because we had been talking forever. We
had talked hypothetically about
doing a podcast, and
you had the germ of the idea.
I had a microphone. I was like, but we just did not have the wherewithal to put things together.
Then I met Alex, and I had that lunch at
it was
Niselka,
serendipitous,
and you were like, do you want to do a podcast? And I was like, actually, me and Matt Goldich, and we put it all together. Yeah. And then we did it.
And I immediately loved your vibe. Yeah. I immediately connected with you. You both feel very familiar to me. And people I would hang out with.
And we, I think, had an idea of what it was from the very beginning, because it's a pretty loose format. I mean,
but we stuck the idea to it right away.
But we stuck to it, and also the fact that we came in to do a quote unquote test episode with our friend Mike Weber, and it was fine, and so we just aired it. We weren't even necessarily sure that we were going to run it.
And Weber, after that first test episode, gave us the note, which was, you should do a thing at the end where
The blow-off?
The blow-off was Weber's idea?
That was Weber.
Right.
Oh, I didn't know.
We may have named it,
I didn't know
but
what
that
the
was
genesis was.
his.
Yeah.
He said you should do something at the end where you ask people.
That's why he's the only 2-time guest.
Yeah.
That's why he was invited back. But and then the rest, as they say, is history.
And then,
we
very soon
Bristery.
after, we booked Neil Brennan, which was just like,
Well, he
we
was
have
in
this
town.
brand new podcast that we booked Neil fucking Brennan.
And the first time, remember, I was out of town.
and he blew us off.
Yeah, and I had my friend fill in, and it was a whole thing. I was like panicking from
right.
Scotland. I was like, oh my God, what's happening?
Yeah.
Well, what happened was Neil was one of our very first guests that we had booked. And in fact, it was a rare Friday where, in fact, I believe that our child care had like a doctor's appointment. So I literally had to like hire a babysitter to come here so that I could come do this. And then Neil did not show up. And he was apologetic
Then he came
about it.
a few weeks later, and we were his blow-off.
And we were his blow-off. He was able to.
It was like a classic
and that was
early
when
moment.
And by the way, that was when Three Mics was just a one-man show he was doing.
We were
here
talking
in New
about
York.
the development of it,
And then it later became a huge thing on Netflix.
Yeah,
and led to
yeah.
all these
I
great
saw it
opportunities.
And I
for Neil.
appreciated his candor. He was just like, I wasn't feeling it that morning.
Yeah.
Right?
He had a rough night, I believe.
Yeah,
I think
like
it was
a-
something like that.
with
just-
an interpersonal
interpersonal
dispute.
relationship.
So he
Like
was
the third mic stuff.
yes, there. Yeah, it was
He had an issue with the third mic.
it
Stuff.
was some third mic stuff. Yeah.
That's it. No, third mic were the one-liners. I think it was
Yeah.
the middle mic.
All right, let's just go around the table. Alex, you go first. Give me one great memory, great episode that you have a great memory of that you remember. Just give me one.
Just
that
one
you wanna
right
talk
now?
about. Yeah, and then I'll go, and then Andrew can go.
I mean, it's hard to pick. I'll say this. I thought the best episode for me was Brian Tucker. Just
Yes.
hearing about,
great episode.
going through that day. I mean, that was a seminal moment in SNL history where you had, the election of Donald Trump, right?
Yeah.
And then you have that very next Saturday, you have Dave Chappelle hosting. And he really, thoroughly ran us through that day.
Yeah, okay, so we've had a bunch of
Brian
SNL
Tucker's the head writer
writers
of
on.
SNL, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, if you're a young writer, you're not going on podcasts giving away sort of how how everything's made.
The sausage is made, yeah.
the sausage, thank
Yeah.
you. But Tucker is he's been there for a decade. He's the head writer, he's not afraid of any. So he just went in and kind of went through the process. A lot of the writers, late night shows come on and they have to bob and weave around some secrets about the show format and
And Neil later
process.
shouted that episode on Twitter, calling Brian one of America's greatest sketch comedians, if not the greatest, because obviously he's got the Chappelle show, the Chris Rock show. The
his
SNL
resume is
really good,
insane.
And he really did give you and that is one of the things that I've been proudest of about our show is I think those are some of our best episodes where we take people behind the scenes of what it's like. Not necessarily the big names or whatever, but just the people who work on these things, whether it's TV or whatever, and learning about the ins and outs and the process.
I mean, it's my big overarching thing, but I'll say it now just because it organically came up. But that's the thing I'm by far most proud of is just you look around at the landscape of at least just comedy adjacent podcasts that are recorded in New York.
Yeah.
Nobody's booking the guests that we were booking. I mean, clearly we had the comedians covered.
Yeah.
But nobody was booking the Ryan Lings and the
Naomi Steinberg, Mindy Tucker,
Turner Sparks, even.
Nobody's the behind the scenes people.
Producers, development people.
Not many people are booking a Dan Powell, you know, and these guys are making all of the things that people are watching and raving about. And so I was super. I know it's if I was just a listener of this podcast, I would have been so psyched about the breadth of the pool of guests.
Yeah. And by the way, I want to mention about Tucker, another cool thing. I don't know if you guys remember this, but he was on. And then after the episode, we were talking on mic, and he was telling us about how the following week Chadwick Boseman was going to be hosting SNL, and he had a kernel of an idea for a Black Jeopardy sketch with Chadwick Boseman, and he was explaining it. And first of all, I'm not a superhero guy, so I didn't quite get all the Black Panther references when he was explaining them to me. But then I was like, hey, it sounds great, I'm sure. And then a week later, that sketch airs, and it's crushes. It's like a great sketch, and I'm like, and I did end up getting all the jokes, by the way, but and it was like cool to hear about that, like before it was anything.
Yeah, and that podcast Origin said it was like one of the most successful sketches in recent memory. Yeah, like one of the most memorable ones. Yeah.
And just like the New York, for everything it doesn't have in terms of the entertainment business, it does have like the most of the late night shows, and we pretty much had representation from.
I think so.
Last week tonight we had obviously Seth Meyers,
many Daily Show people. We had Colbert people.
Sure.
So we kind of.
I have to
SNL people, of course.
I have to say, I mean, this is like a fat pitch right down the middle. But if I had to pick one episode for me that stands out, that was like the most fun, was Phil Rosenthal, and that was you were able to.
We still don't even know how you
don't know how you
just called us one day and said, "Do you guys want to do you want to have Phil Rosenthal on the podcast?"
That just miraculously landed on my lap. I had nothing to do with that. That is all credit to Mark Malkoff.
And most of the guests were probably friends of ours, people we booked.
That was just gifted to me, and it was a total mitzvah.
And he was on a promotional tour for
correct.
And I mean, and the thing is, like, I've always obviously been a huge fan of both. I would say Raymond, and then also his food show, and then. But like, and so it was a thrill to have him. But then it wasn't until he came in that we realized how much each of us had in common with him, and how many different areas we had to talk about.
I can certainly say that was like the one where I'm sitting across the table, like fanboying out.
You're pinching yourself,
but also he genuinely seemed to really enjoy himself and have a good time.
And he wrote a letter to Mark. I forgot to tell you guys. He wrote like a whole thing to Mark saying how much fun he had.
Ubermensch, and we've very sporadically emailed him about certain food things, or like if we're going to LA, like picking him up on his offer to go to his house and stuff.
So
not that we've done that.
But I mean, it was just a great hour. We just had it just felt like we were really having a great conversation with a guy that neither of us had ever met before. And so
food, that was obvious. Yeah. Is that your official one, or
that is my official favorite? Just right off the top of my head, favorite episode. I mean, I have many more to talk about, but do you have one that off the top of your head that? Really
I mean, I just think about I love superlatives, and so I can the hardest. I think both of us laughed was Gabrus.
Sure, that was on the LA trip. You missed those.
I listened to Gabrus. He was my favorite of the LA bunch.
I mean, look, the guy has 17 podcasts. He's a professional podcaster.
Yeah.
He knows what he's doing, and he's just that guy that's going to make you. That's just a mile a minute, tour de force.
We were cracking up. I mean, it was.
I said something slightly racist, and he called me out on it, and it led to a huge rant of his.
Yeah,
and it was wonderful. So I always remember that moment, and and weirdly.
Gabrus is one of those people, when I'm talking to him, I don't understand how he's not the most famous person on the planet.
100%.
I don't get it.
I'm just I want to make a TV show with you.
Yeah.
And then the other one that always sticks out for me is Neil Punsalon.
Yes.
Which is
again, I love that one.
The poster boy for
who would have that guy on as a guest, though?
This is not an insult to Neil. Believe me, he's the poster boy.
Well, he's a hermit.
Nobody's having Neil Punsalon on the
podcast.
Very few. He was on Doughboys. He was on Doughboys, and he doesn't want to. Yeah, but he does not want to. Be front facing. And I mean, that conversation was so much fun. He's one of my favorite people to chop it up with anyway. But to do it with you and on mic, and then at the end. When right before we sign off, and I ask him, because I mean, obviously I know where he's going to go with it, but I asked him for marriage advice, because I was newly married.
Yes.
And he goes, "Don't do it." And he goes into his whole thing about I mean, he's very happily married. He has I think 4 kids, 3 kids, 4 kids. I get things wrong, but in a vacuum. His answer is don't do it, and he has a whole thing. So I always remember the Neil Punsalon episode. So shout out to Neil.
Yeah,
that's on my list.
We've had good luck with Neils.
Yeah, Neil Brennan, Neil Punsalon. I'm trying to think if there's another one. Alex, do you have a particularly hilarious memory or a?
I mean, I have a couple I jotted down. The one that really that had me giggling, like a schoolgirl in the booth, was Joel Solomon.
I mean,
Joel's the funniest.
Yo,
I mean,
I'll put
I
that
love
right
that
up there
guy
with Gabrus
so
for
much.
probably the hardest you left.
Yeah.
Because he
The
had...
seatbelt story.
He made a joke about Ted Cruz, I remember. And Neil was a guy, or Joel, excuse me, was a guy who we have both known forever, both worked with separately, and then pretty shortly after that, ended up moving out to L.A. to write for Bill Simmons' short-lived HBO show, and then was on Simmons' podcast like a month after he was on
got
ours.
He's like in the Ringer network.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he's doing great.
Yeah.
One of the funniest like in person people you'll ever meet.
And he's like a Seinfeld character.
He's
and
a
that's
Seinfeld
I go
character.
through life trying to find Seinfeld characters. So when he walked in,
it's
I
a
was
very
just like,
apt
elated.
description.
Yes.
It was the jacket.
I have to say, another great time.
Right, the seatbelt story.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, that I had was our live episode with Sarah Haynes, which was so.
I loved it.
She was delightful.
She was delightful, and she was so nice to do it. Which, like, we were nervous about approaching her. We were having. I mean, I think we were really struggling to find.
We went through so many options of like reaching for the stars. People like got turned down left and right.
Yeah, for
and
live guests for pod.
And I was like, I guess I could. I haven't talked to her in like a decade, but we were friends when we were pages. And I Facebook messaged her out of like pure desperation with like a million caveats. Like, I know this is probably a no.
Yeah.
You definitely, no worries if not, like a million caveats. And she, again, it was like, wrote right back like, oh my God, I would love to. Hi guys.
Yeah.
Let's do it. When?
And we both worked with her. She was hosting The View at the time. She's now on Good Morning America, right?
Well, it's called Strahan and Sarah.
Right. So, but she was also in that phase where she had like a 3-month-old, and she was kind of thrilled to get out of the house.
And
on
it was
Saturday.
like a weekend, like go to the lower east side and come do this live podcast in front of what we had like maybe
we had 40 or 50 people. It was exciting, you know what? But a few.
I loved it.
It was fun because a few people that we were pages with came out to, and then there were younger pages
a lot
that
of
were
her
very
coworkers
inspired.
from the View, like View staff members came out.
There were younger people that were like inspired to see her, and she's, by the way, just like a great guest, just like a great conversational. I mean, that's what she does professionally.
Why, and I sent like the blast out to like the page alumni, so there were like young pages that just were like, I want to see 3 ex pages talk about their life.
It was awesome.
And then speaking of live episodes, obviously our 100th at the Stand with Christy and Giannis Papas.
Again, the recording snafu. Of course.
Recording snafu week.
We could talk about that, but Chris and
Giannis were just like, again, it was like, who are we going to book? And I was like, we need home run hitters. Let's get these guys.
Chris DiStefano is another one of those people where I'm like, I mean, obviously he's doing great. He's like touring the country, just like, headlining. But I mean, he's another one of those people where I'm like, you are so funny. I don't understand how you're
so
not
funny, so
like,
fast.
Somebody is going to eventually figure out a way to make him like Seinfeld or like, like Raymond, or I
mean, he's had sitcom pilots,
and but someone is going to figure it out eventually because he's so, and he doesn't. He's just like, he's kind of like a guy's guy, but he's so quick and so funny.
Funny.
He's very unassuming.
Yeah.
I love that. That was so much fun.
Yeah. Now that was one of, let's talk about it. There have been 2 big Alex.
What was the other one? I was trying to think. Was it Marc Webb?
It was Marc Webb.
I remember, yeah.
So, well, let's start with the Marc Webb one, because we have Marc Webb on, who's a big director.
So Weber hooked us up with Marc Webb.
Directed Spider-Man. Directed what's Weber's movie that he directed?
Yeah,
500 Days of Summer.
We'd have to look at
Yes,
500 Days of Summer.
Yeah. So we were very lucky to get Marc Webb in to promote his movie. We felt very honored. And about 8-10 minutes into the interview, we hear
Alex
Alex
was
go,
like,
I started
stop.
panicking. I am like jumping up and down like a lunatic,
Stop.
waving him off.
Like,
no!
It's one thing if that happens with like our friends, like Stuckey and Murray or something.
Yeah.
And we're just like,
Meanwhile, it's this guy we've never met, where he's like a big director.
He's like doing a favor for a friend, doesn't know us.
And I gotta say, could not have been cooler.
He was
about
very
it.
cool
It was like
about
very
it.
like we started over, like he literally like
probably privately thinks we're jabronis.
Yeah.
probably yeah.
Like, what is this boondoggle operation?
Yeah. Oh my God.
Well, I mean,
this putz
and
of
to
a
your credit,
producer.
it was better to catch it 6 or 8 minutes in.
Yeah, thank
than,
God.
Thank
40.
God. It was the whole episode, imagine.
But he was a mensch about it, and we ended up having a great podcast. He was a fascinating guy. Obviously, like to have that level of director on the podcast. It's crazy.
Now the live episode where Alex forgot to record was a little bit more dramatic.
Again, at the Stand.
Now,
Christy, Giannis, or
I don't think they were on stage.
They weren't here yet.
We were doing the opening.
Yeah.
And by the way, that
was hilarious.
That was a stressful one because they were late and we were worried they weren't going to show up, and we were like, when do we start? And then
we had like paying customers, which is not usually a worry of ours.
And then you and I were doing the opening, and you ran out during.
I was like Costanza in the fire. I was like, guys,
very much like pushing children out of the way.
Yeah.
And
you came out of the bathroom without your pants on.
Now that was one. Thankfully, that was during our opening and not during the guests, and you caught it.
Vandaling.
That was, and then it took a few minutes to get things going. But that gave the home that gave the people there, the live audience, something to be excited about.
Odds of the city is what that was for me.
And speaking of that, I'll talk about my probably biggest. Faux pas / screw up on the podcast, which was we had Carrie Keegan in.
Yeah.
Your former host on VH1. Very nice, very funny.
And she had her book.
Yeah. And I try not to check my phone too much during the podcast while we're talking. I try not to just
limit Matt's screen time.
But there are times when you check it occasionally. You're checking it now just to make sure
check my phone.
There's no emergencies on the home front. Nothing important you're missing. Sometimes I'll just glance at it for 2 seconds while two other people. And on this particular day, I was blowing up. My phone was I was getting a lot of texts and calls from on the home front, and I was like, "What's going on?" It turned out what was happening was. My nanny, my son's caretaker, was having sort of a medical issue episode, and so I was closer to home than my wife, and so I ended up basically making the decision. I got to get out of here.
We were 6 minutes into the conversation with Carrie,
and it was a calculated decision where I was like. He'll be fine, and I don't know if it was awkward for the listener. I think you.
Well, here's the thing, she's probably one of, I don't know, a handful of guests where in that scenario, seamless, totally fine. I mean, I spent hundreds of hours with her,
and I didn't even say anything to you.
You literally just walked out.
Just escaped. It was an odd choice by me.
You looked at your phone. You're like, I got to take this, and I was like, oh, he'll be back, and then you just didn't come back, and I just went on talking with Carrie.
Because I could have. I almost felt like because she was a kind of a. She was an important guest for us, and I didn't want to be like, stop, everybody stop. I have to take off. I'm really sorry. I just want you guys.
You handled it with aplomb, which I don't think I would have.
I felt like I handled it awkwardly, but I'm glad you approved.
Well, again, it's like she's one of a handful of people who I could sit. I mean, I was the first person to talk to her for 3 years.
Yes,
every morning.
And thank God it was that guest, and it wasn't another guest.
Somebody that was a friend of mine.
She had her book, which was all about curse words, and I had stuff prepared, and it ended up being totally fine. But again, if it was one of the comedians that you booked,
if it had been a friend you had never met before, something. If it had been a friend of mine, if it had been a friend of mine, I probably would have just said, "Hey guys, let's stop here."
Right.
And let's, by the way, it's cool. That's the other thing is cool is to look back at, a few years at some of the guests we had on in the early days and how big they've become. People like Aparna or Amber Ruffin or.
I have to say this just because I asked Jamie before I came. I was like, "What are your highlights?" Mm-hmm. And because we're talking about faux pas, the first thing she said was, "Well, obviously all the mistakes you've made." Because my wife and my sister-in-law just always point this out about me when I tell a story. Is I get it 80% correct.
Yeah.
I'm always missing I'm always incorrect or slightly off.
Is it because you embellish?
On a huge detail.
Yeah.
No, I'm I don't know. I don't remember the real specifics. So if something took place on 14th Street, I'll be like, it took place on 23rd Street. Bigger mistakes as
long as you capture the essence.
If a scene happened in a Friends episode, I might have said it whatever it is, but they point out that I make mistakes basically every time I've told a story on this podcast.
Yeah.
And then Jamie's other memory highlight was when I told the story about going to the urologist and he asked me to take my pants down, and I thought the way he phrased it was weird.
Yeah.
And I told you this whole story, and then she loved that you let me get the whole story out and my whole kvetch out, and then you just go, I don't think it's that weird. She's like, I yelped. I loved it.
Take my pants down. That's amazing.
Yeah, take your pants down.
Your pants down. Yeah.
It was so directive. It felt like I was in a porno.
I will say that that has been one of the highlights for me is your stories at the beginning, because I often feel like it's funny because as a person and as somebody who's performed stand-up, I have a tendency to, I think, commandeer things or want to be the center of attention. And one of my favorite things is to be the straight man and to let you sort of
it's that weird.
Go off on something to sort of let you tell like a long extended story and then react to it and ask questions to sort of draw out more of
it's my job in real life, which is to produce conversation.
Yes.
And so I'm very aware when I'm off mic walking around in my regular life. I'm like, oh, that's a good story. I'm going to keep that.
And I think for me, like producing you guys was the closest thing to Jerry and George and Monks.
Yeah.
You know, I felt like everything goes back to Seinfeld.
Sure, of course.
Yeah. And speaking of which, by the way, I mean, you were probably going to mention this, but, you know, indirectly we're the reason you had Larry David in your apartment. So
tell that
absolutely. So you guys planted the seed, were the catalyst for arguably, not even arguably, the greatest moment of my life. Seinfeld is like the Rosetta Stone for me. And so basically we had Chef on.
Bill Chef, former Letterman writer. Great guest.
Legendary comedy writer.
Instrumental in Matt's career.
Instrumental, a mensch of all mensches. So we have Bill Chef on. Then this is like 6-7 months later, out of nowhere, I get an email from Chef being like, hey, you're the podcast guy, right? And I'm like, I guess so. And he's like, well, SiriusXM tapped me to do this mini-series, and I'd love to record out of your studio. They don't have any studio time to lend us. So let's arrange a deal. And I said, yeah, let's do it. Why not? Having no clue, what the concept was or who the guests would be. We obviously, hit it off, and then a week later he just goes, okay, for our first episode, we're going to have Larry David on. Make sure you block off these days. And I'm like, I'll block off the rest of my life.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? Like Larry David? I'll even if like it was my my wedding day or the birth of my first child, I would cancel all of it for Larry David.
Studios is his apartment. And
the funny
that means Larry David is coming to Avenue B.
It's crazy. Yeah, you could say Avenue B. That's fine.
That's it. I'm not going to say your number.
But I have to say that I swear to God this is true. Everybody would ask me, why did you build a podcast studio? And I was like, so one day I could have someone who I revere, like Larry David. And I would always use Larry David as the example. And then, sure enough...
So, wait, you had a fun story from when he was here in your apartment?
Yes.
About the coffee?
About everything. So, like I said, I'm obsessed with Larry David. Curb and Seinfeld are my favorite shows. And I know everything about him. I've listened to like every interview, every podcast with him. So I know, his favorite snack is raw cashews. And I know that B, he loves herbal tea.
There were raw cashews all over the apartment.
So
just spread out like rose petals.
Right. It's like American
Beauty.
To your It's like American Beauty, except I'm covered in cashews. Yeah. So I run out to my local grocery store. I get raw cashews. I get herbal tea. And I set a bowl of raw cashews.
And a big salad.
in the table in my living room. And, the day he comes, I'm like whipping myself into a frenzy. I'm like, I can't believe this is happening. Is this real? So I set up everything, and he walks in, and I'm like, holy crap, Larry David is in my apartment. So I'm a little flustered, and so I just go to him. I go, hey, Larry.
Did you put on a long sleeve shirt for this?
No.
Yeah,
no, I did. I have a button down. Okay. I'm wearing, I'm usually like I am barefoot. I'm always barefoot, but I have shoes on, nice loafers on.
Yeah.
And so I say to him, Larry, would you care for a snack? And he goes, what do you got? I go, I got raw cashews. And he goes, raw cashews? They're my favorite. And he just does a beeline for the raw cashews in a bowl. And I'm standing right next to him, and he tips the bowl over into his hands, and he goes, a lot of people take their dirty, grubby hands, and they put their hands in the bowl to get the cashews. You don't do that. You tilt the bowl. You tilt it like this. And he's talking directly to me, And I'm looking at him and I'm going, like, my face just says
everything you ever wanted.
And I'm like, you're giving me everything.
The full David.
The full David. I feel
David.
like I'm in a Curb episode.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is the
City.
greatest moment of nothing will ever be topped.
It's great.
And it was just the greatest thing ever.
Amazing.
And then so, that was one thing. And then the herbal tea, obviously. And then the funniest thing was at the end, I go, Larry, we have a mutual friend. It just so happens that, my dentist is Lloyd Feinberg, who happens to be your old roommate. And he goes like this, you know Lloyd? And he freaked out. He leapt up, and that was it. I mean, I just got his attention. He's the anti-dentite.
Just
fantastic.
A story, the Michael Torpy, Michael Jordan story.
With the Hitler mustache.
Was pretty
She's in the
great.
Hitler
I
mustache
have that in my
portion.
Was a pretty great revelation on the podcast.
Yeah, and by the way, Torpy was here talking about that show when it was not even
and now it's
a
like
show, and now it's like a big hit show.
It's
paid off
on
True TV. All right, I'm going to bring up.
And you know who runs it and writes
Oh,
Ethan Berlin,
former guest of the pod.
Love Ethan Berlin.
Bought his children's book.
Yes,
I read it to Lev.
Oh, great. He was great. I love Ethan. He was here with Sam Shafson.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to bring up a few more guests. You guys tell me what your memories are. Tell me if you have any good. Janine Garofalo was here on the show.
Loved it. Neither of us had to talk.
No.
That's what I remember. Is she was just off and running.
Yeah. I loved talking with her because, one of the things we talk about, obviously, on the podcast is how you structure your day and being busy, and the fact that she has no email.
Yeah. The anti-technology.
Does not how to use email.
Completely disconnected.
So you can only connect with her through text messages.
Also, that was one of those cool moments for me personally because there are certain comedians who have certain jokes that I hold sort of dear. And always reference, and to be able to bring bring that up to the person was great. So her joke about I have a very can you peel my orange approach to life.
Yes,
was just so fun for me to be able to tell her that that's always stuck with me.
She just has a way with words.
Yeah, it's the best.
I love her.
That was awesome.
Judah Friedlander was here.
Just his life.
Yeah,
I was like, get it together.
Yeah.
He needs a gopher or something like that.
He's very successful, so you can't knock on
that. That is the thing. Yeah.
He's the greatest of all time, but
I don't think he has an apartment. I think he just sleeps in hotel rooms.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think he does. He did at the time.
At the time, I think I spoke to him.
It's almost like wrestling. You never know what's a work and what's a shoot with him. What is
100%.
What's real and what is he embellishing and. Is he doing the character? Is he not doing the character?
He has a method that works for him. Laurie Kilmartin was here.
Laurie was fun. Look, she was obviously one of the great joke writers of our time, and but at the time, she was promoting the book about her losing her father, and so there was a somber.
She's somebody who I probably respect more than anybody in the business, and so it's just nice to get to talk to her.
That was cool. There was just a somber note to it,
and I remember I was having technical difficulties with my computer, so I had to bring my mixer. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So I was that was one of the only ones where I was actually in the studio with you guys and not in the control booth.
It was awful. Awful experience having you in here.
Yeah,
Pat Kiernan from New York One.
I mean, one of your best, probably your best booking besides Chef.
It was so great that he was able to
best.
do it.
Surreal.
Was obviously his schedule in the morning is ridiculous.
He's got the most interesting schedule of anybody.
He made time for us, and he talked about Canadian cereals, and we ended up figuring out that he really likes wrestling. We talked a little about wrestling, and huge. I mean, I'll be forever a Pat Kiernan fan now.
I turn on my TV. He's the first guy I see every time.
In the papers.
We had you're a great book review. The Girls from Glow.
That was awesome. I mean, again, that's capitalizing on a moment in time, but also seeing somebody that you knew when make it big and still be able to hit them on the side, and they're still the same person, and they're like, sure, I'll come do your podcast. I'm on a press tour, and they came by, and they were one of the few guests that we had who came with a publicist, but it's my friend Rebecca. We shot, she was a cast member on Boiling Point, so that was awesome, and just the right the right guest at the right time, right as Glow was about to make it big.
And Glow, the TV show, the only wrestling thing that I've ever really liked.
Content that I love wrestling. Got into Matt's.
Zach Linder, what do we think about having Linder on?
Bromance really blossomed.
You guys are like BFs now, and it all started here on the pod.
Yeah, gotta love Linder. He's like, I never met someone like him. He's just like Costanza on steroids,
Yeah, talk about like finding Seinfeld in your everyday life.
Oh my God, he epitomizes that.
Between the guests we've had with the most sheer charisma and star power, it's probably between Linder and Nick Lachey, I would think. Right? Yeah. It's probably like 50-50.
I have a couple regrets. They're not regrets because there's value in every episode, and I thoroughly enjoyed doing every episode. But there's like places like the Nick episode. We did 5 in a day in LA, and Nick was like probably second to last.
Yeah.
And again, Nick is like Carrie, where like I spent hours and hours with this guy. And after the fact, I'm like, we went in the completely wrong direction with him. Like we were talking about his current day to day, and I was like, I always wanted to go back and do Nick again and be like, give us a day on tour when you're like. Because I wanted to ask, like, when you do the curtain call and you go backstage and then you come back out, like, what do you do when you go backstage and all that, like, fun boy band stuff? We didn't hit any of it.
No, we really didn't.
Because he was, like, in the throes of, like, daddy duty. And so that was, like, content-wise, that was one of my regrets. Yeah. No, I love Nick, and I'm so grateful that he later,
like, almost immediately after we did that, he also got cast on Dancing with the Stars.
I know, and he couldn't tell it. He probably knew and couldn't tell us because I would have geeked out because I love Dancing with the Stars, and I would have asked him all kinds of like inside baseball questions.
Things to talk.
Yeah, so that's one, and another one like that is Kevin Miller, who's one of our like great friends and my old roommate. I'm seeing him tomorrow for dinner. Like one of my best friends in the whole world. He was in my wedding
yesterday,
and we had Kevin on the podcast, and I was just so like geeked about it. Like I was so like, this is my guy and we're gonna do like all of our jokes, and I should have just laid back and let like an actual conversation, because he has such a great background of
SNL
working on SNL, like in so many different positions, and then migrating, working on the ESPYs. Like there were so many places that we didn't even cover with Kevin. We didn't get like any of his good SNL stories and this and that. So those are probably the two that stick out that I'd like to do over.
Yeah, and my favorite one of my favorite things in the world is the Phil Rosenthal face. That
Kevin does the preeminent Phil Rosenthal face.
Yeah. We turned
created at my bachelor party.
we turned the tables on Jesse David Fox.
Yeah. Well, by the way, Jesse David Fox having a moment right now. Good Ones is like
it's a great podcast.
Gary Goldman
really
episode
taking off.
one of my favorite podcasts ever.
Yeah. And it was funny because Goldman was one of my guests that I always wanted, and then
we tried so many times,
and also he ended up doing Go Bun, and I was like, they pretty much talked about everything I would have wanted to talk about. Like there was no reason to.
Yeah, that just. The first 20 minutes of that podcast, just his bit, his Trader Joe's bit is like something that like I've never listened to a podcast twice, but I'll go back just to listen to the bit.
Yeah.
Like if I have like a 20-minute drive, I might just like throw that on.
Yeah. And there's one word for snow. Eskimos have one word for snow, but Jews have 1,000 words for idiot. Yeah. It's just like so good. So good.
And then just one more thing I wanted to mention, and then I'll open the floor to you guys. But it's probably as far as what people have been busy with since the they were on our podcast. Probably the greatest one would be, I think, Jensen Karp.
Jensen, I mean, he's literally a morning drive DJ on K-Rock.
Yes, and then he married.
And he married Topanga,
and they had a baby.
What? They're having a baby?
No,
did they have?
Is she pregnant? Maybe they're.
I think they're having it. And he created Drop the Mic. Like he did. He's really happy.
He married Topanga?
Yeah.
Oh my.
What is her real name? So that we give her the.
These are the things I get wrong.
Please.
Danielle Fishel.
Thank you. Yeah, let's not insult her by calling her Topanga. Anything else any of you guys wanted to bring up that we forgot or that we mentioned? Alex?
Yeah, I was going to ask you guys. I mean, you kind of answered this question, but I was going to ask you, like, who's a guest you really wanted to have that you didn't get a chance to?
Goldman was one, and then was there anything else where there was somebody where I was like, oh man, I wished we had figured out a way to get that person on, and it never worked out.
Now I'm going through. I mean, I just saw it, but Michelle Collins was fun back in the early days. No, this is such a weird one that
two
like
of you co-hosts.
No one will know the name, but like I tried so many times and we just could never like make it work with longtime Late Night with Conan O'Brien writer Chris Albers, who I worked with on a project years and years ago, and just always thought it'd be cool to have that guy on it. I think he wrote monologue and stuff for Conan all those years, and we just never were able to make it work.
Gaffigan was one that I had reached out to, and obviously finding about his day with all of his children and everything,
and
it just never worked.
Both of our
me,
like food.
Yeah.
For me, it was Richard Kind.
Oh, did we talk about Richard Kind?
For me, that was the guy who I always thought would be perfect for this podcast.
The other one was John Doman, who we had talked about from The Wire.
Doman, I never really fully pursued that, but that was
saw him on the subway.
That was a huge story.
Who did he play on The Wire?
In the early, that was one of my huge...
He was the police chief on The Wire, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but I knew him from The Affair. But John Doman, who I saw on the subway, and for weeks I couldn't figure out which that guy actor he was. Recently, it happened to me. Did I tell this story on one of our final pods? But in the coffee shop in our neighborhood, I saw this actress, and I knew who it was, and I couldn't figure it out. And then I finally figured out that it was.
I just want to say another moment I wanted to talk about, or another guest I wanted to talk about that really stood out for me. That was really special. Was Naomi Steinberg.
That was
someone
a great one.
who romanticizes that era of comedy, that Luna Lounge. Like everybody says, if I were to go back in time, I'd go back to France during the Paris Impressionist era. I would go back to the 90s and see Marc Maron host at Luna Lounge with Zach Galifianakis, with John Benjamin, with all of those. That scene to me is the golden age of comedy.
And we later found out that I did it the same night as Dan Powell.
Yes.
Susan, Jessica Hecht.
Jessica Hecht lives in my neighborhood, saw her at Plowshares Coffee. It haunted me for 2 weeks until I could figure out who she is.
And she was on Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Naomi Steinberg was a fun one because through working at Bird Brain with Ryan Ling, she was one of his. She worked there, and we connected and really hit it off. And I was like, "Would you come do the podcast and reminisce a little?" And she brought her like old comedy notebooks with like her bookings,
amazing,
which was like just
And that was another, by the way. Judah brought like all scraps of paper with like jokes on it. It was crazy.
I'll tell you one that off the comedy trail, the Alex Delaney episode. I
really enjoyed that one.
Steaks,
right off of him doing the whatever it was.
He just did a poutine one.
He did poutine. Yeah. He's done pizza. He's done Chicago hot dogs. But that was just so much fun for me, and take like a little divergence for us to just talk about food, and obviously being both from Philly and having like the definitive cheesesteak talk was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Could I say the guest that gave me the heebie-jeebies?
Yeah.
Remember Josh Beckerman?
Oh,
the magic...
The pretty magician.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
First of all, the magic trick...
I thought you were going to say Rachel Feinstein, but...
he gave you
that's a different type of
He
heebie-jeebies.
gave you the heebie-jeebies because you were blown away by the magic trick.
Correct.
Not negative heebie-jeebies.
A little creepy, a little bit of a creepy sort of demeanor.
There's no way you can be a magician, successful or unsuccessful, and not be a little creepy.
Exactly.
I'm sorry. It's just part of the deal.
Yeah.
Wow. Just hearing and also running into these people around the city and realizing like, oh, we had that guy, we had
the
that.
The Sklar Bros were really fun
amazing.
Because again, like I randomly lived with them, and then to have that moment where I I was your roommate, and they were like, you? I was you?
And by the way, I hope we did a good job of trying to have not just white Jewish guys on the podcast. We tried very hard
to diversify,
to have women and have people of color and everything. And we had a bunch. And I wish we could have done better. There were a lot of people I tried to get that couldn't figure it out. But that was something that was important to me, especially because we're two white Jewish guys. To sometimes have a third one in here, it's like okay. Like
I wish we had like a production staff who could go and make like sort of like reels, like all of my factual mistakes and all of your
I actually brought up
all
to
of
Alex,
your stories
what if
about
we did a best of
the
episode
gym
once,
at work.
And it's like, yeah, it's too hard.
I mean,
we're not paying you enough.
I think
All
maybe
about-
one day I'll do it if I have enough time.
all the times you reference the gym at work.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it went through a whole renovation, and I had to
Somehow
leave.
the work gym came up in like 70% of your stories.
Well, it was very, very. It was
a big part of your life.
Yeah.
One day I'll mine through it.
Yeah. All right, we got to wrap up in a few minutes here, but I just, I mean, it's been an amazing experience doing this with both you guys. It's crazy that it's been like, over 3 years of our lives together have been working on this. Yeah. And, and like you said, maybe this won't be the last episode. Maybe someday we'll figure out a way to do another one if we get an opportunity.
Quick question. What was your favorite blow-off segment?
Oh.
Favorite blow? I mean, the memorable one is Neil saying we were his blow-off.
I didn't. Torpy was the one who was like, I'm honest with people. Like, if I'm at a party and I want to go talk to, he's like, I'm going to go talk to these people now. And I was like, that was very,
Two more really fun ones. Dana Doot was really fun because again we were
loopy at the end of the day.
We were super punch drunk by the fifth one in 5 hours in LA, and you and Dan go.
That was a crazy
back.
day. Was trying to do 5 in a day,
and Dan was very fun, and he's in Cobra Kai, which is so shout out to Dan. And then again off the comedy path, Sierra Lindsay Koss.
That was a very moving,
so cool,
heartwarming.
I think
emotional.
I think about that podcast all the time, especially with like all the politics that are obviously politics is everything now. And the one moment in the podcast where she talks about Hillary and she's like, "I'm just sad because America missed out on what could have been a great president."
Yeah.
And so whenever I see her come up in the news or whatever, I'm just like,
yeah.
Like to hear it from somebody who was like on the trail with her, be like, man, like shaking her head, like we really. As a country, missed out.
Yeah. Well, there's always Joe Biden.
I don't want to bring it down, but like she was a great guest, like fascinating, like sleeping on Air Force One and like
great, interesting. Talking about working for Obama.
Who has those stories? There's like 8 people.
It was a podcast that I actually submitted to Vulture.
Yeah.
For them to post because I was like, this is so interesting and unique.
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
All right, Andrew, any last memories, last thoughts, closing?
No, look, this was great. I mean, it was a way to hang out with you and and hang out with so many of our friends and collaborators, and then like relationships that have like spawned out of the podcast. I mean, it really was a vehicle to be creative in at a time professionally where like I don't necessarily get to be so creative anymore because I'm management, running things and whatever. And so for me, it was like an outlet to like be creative without any stakes and just like have fun and like be funny and, hang out with you. And then obviously the relationship with you, Alex, has been great. Like you're like a friend for life.
Oh, 100%.
And so
we got to hang out with a lot of awesome, cool people, and also Alex. So
so that's been really cool. And like, like my sister-in-law got really into the podcast, and she came on and was a guest. And,
talked about the Rice Krispie treats.
And those type of things were just like really, really rewarding. Yeah, it's a hard word to say.
And we and obviously we've been friends for a long time, and I always thought we had good comedic chemistry. But for me, I can't tell you how many moments where like I'd be like, a conversation is going somewhere and I'm like, oh, like this is, I don't know where, and then you come out with some comment or some joke where you sort of like rescue it, and I'm just like, oh, thank God he's here.
Which is the reason I was terrible at improv.
Yes.
Because I would look for those moments. But no, I mean, it was fun. It was like a chance to apply all the things that I sort of learned in my 10,000 hours as like a producer, but like I just got to infuse it into the application of hosting a podcast, like when a conversation is look for your blackout moment or all those things. That was really fun, and just Alex, like thank you for all the hours.
Thank you, Alex. We owe you big time.
I mean, you guys, I feel like I've known you guys my whole life. I feel like there's just a strong kinship and bond between you two, and I think we kind of speak the same language, comedy and Seinfeld and all that. And it was just, I loved it
Judaism.
Because it was like, as adults, you can't really say, it's not socially acceptable to be like, hey, let's have a play date. You know, you can't really say that.
No, this is the closest.
And then this is the closest
thing.
Like a podcast is almost like that.
It's
in
a
way.
playground. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost like you're asking people.
It's a
for
sandbox. To use a corporate term, like
around.
who's playing in your sandbox?
Well, we'll continue to get lunches and hang out.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, you want to grab lunch now? I'm getting a little hungry.
Yeah, we might.
We probably will end up getting lunch now, but no, just thank you, both of you. Obviously, Alex, like the man hours and like Friday mornings. Like, so I'm sure there were times when you're like, ugh, I don't want to wake up and do this podcast at 10 a.m.
Well, we didn't make him put on clothes.
But when you walked in the door,
and
all
then it
of
was
that
all
fell.
fine.
Yeah.
I mean, and we weren't doing 4-hour shows like David Feldman.
No, that's a whole other story. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much to all the listeners and everybody who's been a fan.
busybodies.
And commented
and we have another busybody.
Subscribers.
I met this really funny comedian, Orly Matlow, and she. Do you know who she is?
I know her from
Sounds
Twitter.
made up.
And she loves the podcast.
Oh, great.
She like shouted it out to me. And
Our final busybody.
So our final busybody. Okay. Shout out to Orly.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, please, continue to rate and review us, even though we don't really need it at this point. But honestly, when we post this, I hope people will post comments and share it and talk about some of your favorite things. And because it's been a big, meaningful thing to us. So. Yeah, and it was a lot of support from people like Michael Weber, who was like a champion of ours, and Split Cider. AV Club. And Alex, I know you were worried about being a guest, but you did great. This was a great,
you came with notes.
Episode.
I had to come prepared, otherwise I would have sputtered out of control.
Yeah.
Well,
all right.
Thank you to the
Alex.
Showbiz family.
Thanks to the Showbiz family, yes, indeed. And thank you to all the listeners. And thank you, Andrew. It's been great.
Thank you,
Here
Matt.
we are at the end. And we say, as we do at the end of every episode,
stay busy,
everybody. Yeah.
They only get my voicemail 'cause I'm busy. Whenever I get with her, say I'm busy. And I'm gonna hit you later 'cause I'm busy with her.